1999. We stand on the verge of a new year, a new decade, a new century, and a new millennium. How exciting is that? Sarah Norse, I think that's how you say her name, wanted to see it so badly that she made it as far as the age of 119, making her the oldest US citizen ever. And then she promptly died on the 30th of December 1999. Gutted. You missed a hell of a party, Sarah. Also, there were games. Yes, lots of games to see out the millennium that gave us such great things as Vlad the Impaler, the Black Death, Adolf Hitler, and Timmy Mallet. Here is a smorgasbord of them right there on your screen, you lucky, lovely buffoons. Rub them on your eyelids. It was a pretty strong year again, but I would argue not as good as 1997 or indeed its sister year of 1998. But that's not to say that the millennium ended with the whimper of a stricken chihuahua. Because, I mean, that is a big ask to be better than those 2 years. As you can see, there are some barnstormers here already. You just wait until you see that top 10, though. But first, let's take a break from games and briefly look at the year 1999. Just as a reminder of what the world looked like. Much like now, but a lot less angry and a lot less COVID-y, pretty much. Artist Tracy Emin was the talk of the art world when she showed us her piece called My Bed. This consisted of her unmade, dirtyish bed with all the cigarette cartons, old food wrappers, condoms and period-stained underwear that was representative of a sustained time of emotional turmoil for the artist. But really, what a dirty bitch, eh? I suspect most people's beds look like that by week 2 of lockdown in 2020. Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace arrived, making it the first new Star Wars movie for 16 years, because no one counts those Ewok ones, do they? People got very excited, came out a little bit baffled by it, and then went home to whinge on the internet about trade disputes and Jar Jar Binks. That was a brand new thing to do back then, by the way, moan about Star Wars on the internet. Now it's an everyday pastime, like watering the hydrangeas or taking the dog for a walk or doing the washing up. Sorry dear, I won't be a second, I'll be down for the crumpets in due course. I haven't had my daily sanctioned rant about Last Jedi on Twitter yet. And who knows, maybe Twitter would never have existed if that pesky millennium bug hadn't been stopped in its tracks from being a bit of a dickhead. Depending on who you talk to, it was either incredibly well handled by the powers that be or a fuss over nothing. An older computer somehow managed not to be confused by the date changing, and planes didn't fall from the sky, and chimps didn't escape from their computer lock cages to rip off the arms of 8-year-olds, and your cat's screen pet still worked on January the 1st. Thank the electronic lord. In games, the Dreamcast was launched in the West on the awesome date of 9999, which could only be improved if it had come out on 99999, but as mankind will be dead by then, it wouldn't be that smart of a business move from Sega really to wait until that time. The PS2 and the GameCube also were announced, so Sega had best watch its back, eh? For a game to feature on my best of the year list, it has to have come out on its original format in that particular year. So for instance, I couldn't have chosen Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo because it had come out in the arcades a few years before. However, if a game is sufficiently different, such as the NES version of Double Dragon, then I can include that, as it's not that similar to Double Dragon in the arcades. Capiche? It just about makes sense to me. It probably won't make sense to any of you, but I'm sticking with these rules, even though I'll probably break them later on. I'm not very consistent. System Shock 2 was originally not a sequel to System Shock, but a standalone title. But EA did a good thing for once and went, hey, we own the IP, change it up a bit, we'll stick this name on it and more people will buy it. It is a sound plan, but it didn't work. System Shock 2 was a critical darling, but a commercial disappointment, because people are dicks who have no taste. It has rightly got love in later years, however, from the public, and is just as influential as GoldenEye, Doom, Quake, Half-Life and Deus Ex on the first-person shooter genre. A moody horror with roleplay elements, System Shock 2 was well ahead of its time, terrifying when it came out, slow burn, unnerving at other times, and heart-poundingly action-packed during the rest. Another nominee for the Mount Rushmore of the first-person shoot-em-up genre then. System Shock 2 is a good game, it is an important game, and it's something you should play. If you watched the 1997 list, you may have seen that I was quite fond of Final Fantasy VIII's predecessor. Guess what that was called? Final Fantasy VII. Give yourself a biscuit. Why, I practically frotted myself to froth explosion, and I apologise for my audible self-love in that episode. So why is Final Fantasy VIII this low down on this list? I mean, the graphics are better, the storyline is as winding and beguiling as Final Fantasy VII, the music is strong, the characters are varied. But you know what? In all those cases, it just feels lesser somehow, except maybe the graphics. Final Fantasy VII, you see, was pitch perfect, and it hit that sweet spot. I don't know how it did it, but it did. Final Fantasy VIII was not quite there. I mean, let us not dismiss Final Fantasy VIII, as it is a game that I absolutely enjoyed at the time, and it is another terrific example of a story-led Japanese RPG. Once it gets its narrative claws in you, you will play through its lengthy tale until its end. You may forget a lot about it 20 years later like I have, and while I don't have much inclination to play it again, I know that a game that I spent 80 hours with, well, that can't be bad, can it? That cannot be a bad game. Much like Final Fantasy VIII, I'm not convinced Shenmue has aged that well. But boy oh boy, was it impressive at the time. Shenmue's promise was extraordinary. In a pre-GTA 3 world, things like the day and night cycles, weather effects, tons of interactive items, an open world, non-player characters with daily routines, they were unthought of at the time. It is very little wonder that Shenmue was the most expensive game to produce at the time. While a lot of the things I've mentioned seem a little bit so what now, they were groundbreaking features at the time and a terrific signal of intent from Sega for its new hardware. Every story has a beginning. Most of those stories are heroic tales, or romantic ones, or tragedies. The story of Super Smash Bros. And where we are currently is Sonic, Mr. Game & Watch, Ken out of Street Fighter, and Rob the Useless Plastic NES add-on are beating the fecal matter out of each other on the Nintendo Switch. The beginnings, though, they were, well, more refined, and in Super Smash Bros. On the N64, you had a much smaller cast of Nintendo's very most iconic characters, taking each other to task, using fist, claw and foot. This was just as gobsmacking in 1999 as the lineup is today. It really was extraordinary seeing the usually mostly cute and friendly characters of Nintendo's flagship titles decide to dislodge teeth with their little cartoony hands. Kirby, Pikachu, Mario and a host of others had a right set to, with the aim of not having your health reduced to zero on a series of Nintendo game-themed levels, in a title for up to 4 players. A real party player that was too. What a good game. And what a game it was, this franchise launcher. Only Nintendo had the character library strength to pull this off, and pull this off they did in supreme style. Nowadays it's a who's who of the greatest game heroes, but don't overlook its terrific initial entry. It is a very good fighting game, and a great game to pull out at a party. I'm not a tremendous fan of Gran Turismo, and I didn't have Gran Turismo mentioned very often in my 1997 video. But that is because, simply put, I love an arcade driving experience, and I don't like a simulator. I'm not a driver, see, and I just love the arcade feel. But by Gran Turismo 2, the game had become, well, just impossible to ignore. It was everywhere. Everyone loved Gran Turismo and its sequel. Though the initial launch was troubled by a rushed release, thanks to the success of its predecessor, and all the errors and glitches that come with that, Sony offered us new copies if we weren't happy with it, because, patching games wasn't going to happen when all the internet was for then was to find nude pictures of Britney Spears that weren't just poorly photoshopped heads on porn star bodies. So Gran Turismo 2, it was an absolutely stunning game in terms of its look, its physics and its gameplay. It's not going to top a Burnout or a Mario Kart for me, but I can see how it can for other people. No matter how shiny and posh those cars end up being on a PS5, I'm probably not going to buy it. But I can admire it from afar. Now see Gran Turismo, this is a game I really like. Developed by Paradigm Entertainment and released by the not yet mega twats Electronic Arts, it came out on the foggy old Nintendo 64. A jolly knockabout game with a lot of variety, taking the core of Need for Speed but filling it with character and long secret field courses, shortcuts, crates filled with cheats and bonuses. Yeah, bonuses you didn't have to buy. Remember that, EA, you wallet-absorbing twats? A two-player mode and a goddamn battle mode, and that's always going to win me over. Never to be re-released on an eShop of any nature due to the Beetle license, I actually would rate Beetle Adventure Racing as one of the N64's killer apps, even though it was barely talked about then or now. A horror game partly set in the school from Arnie comedy classic Kindergarten Cop. Yes, really. Konami's Silent Hill had the jump scares of Resident Evil in spades, but the real grasp of Silent Hill was that radio static and the unbearable tension of what was coming. But you couldn't see. It was supremely effective. The most unnerved I've ever felt playing a game was the original Silent Hill, when the static was going crazy. I couldn't figure out what it was. And then it caught my eye. There was, and you all know this if you played it, there's the little invisible harmless ghost toddler that runs around in the school. I must have let out a little scream that may have made my mum think I was reaching for the yacht zenith. And that creature was something that couldn't even hurt you. So not only did the game scare me, but the story was intelligent, layered and well written. Silent Hill isn't better than Resident Evil, but it stands instead shoulder to shoulder with Capcom's zombie franchise behemoth. Silent Hill is superb stuff. So here we are in 1999 on the cusp of the PS2 Xbox era, and all that entails, usually less harsh polygons and character action games out of the yazoo. But I'm going to stick in at number 3 a game that looks like a dismal Spectrum clone of the Star Wars arcade, such as Terrorhawks or something. That's nuts, isn't it? Well, my friends, I love weird stuff, and Vib Ribbon is pretty weird. A rabbit, a line, and the lowest of lo-fi vector graphics seems like a dismal proposition, but it's anything but. Jaunty Japanese music smiths Laugh and Beats are our initial guide into Vibby's world, as the early proponent of the rhythm game genre has you looping and leaping through each chord of the off-key pop-tastic peculiar percussion pieces. With just songs on the game disc, this game would be of very limited appeal and probably wouldn't feature on the list at all. But you see that CD tower you have over there, packed with CDs? What do you mean no? What do you mean you sold all your CDs to Music Magpie for 20p in 2003? Well, pretend you still have a full CD tower. Done it? Good. By putting one of those CDs into your PlayStation, you can play along with the music from that CD. That greatest hits of Foster and Allen is another 13 levels. That Cliff Richard back catalogue is a vast world of rhythm game goodness. That Fast Food Rockers CD single is a brand new challenge for you to conquer, like your apparently terrible taste in music. Due to this uniquely old media format reliance, it is unlikely we will see Vib Ribbon appear on any PSN network or indeed any eShop download in the future. But a sequel that runs on audio files? Yes please, Sony. When Tony Hawk first came out, and I'm talking about the game, not the man himself, I'm sure he's happily married and has been for many years, in 1999, the guy was way too old to be poncing about on a skateboard. In 2020, well, he's back with this very game stapled onto its younger brother Tony Hawk 2, and he's way too old now to be on a skateboard, but he is still there. He's still advertising it by being on a skateboard in videos with Jack Black and what have you. Mind you, he is a millionaire with millions of fans for basically doing stuff he loves from his childhood, whereas I am also doing stuff I love from my childhood for literal tens of people and no money at all. Who's the winner here? Tony Hawk's skateboarding was a breath of fresh air on its release in 1999, an ultra-playable, open-leveled experience which borrowed the complex combinations of the decade's one-on-one fighter games and supplanted them into cargo shorts of knee-skin peeling denizens of the skate park. A title as playable today as it was back then, with a finger-twisting dexterity-based game style and a soundtrack that, while of its scene and time, is still a solidly cool listen. You've aged well, Tony, or at least your game has. While we're on the subject of solidly cool post-punk soundtracks, we've got a clutch of songs by Offspring and Bad Religion to help us take punters to their desired destinations here, with Sega's highway code disregarding Uber 'em up, Coin Op, Crazy Taxi. A sprawling open fictional city sets the scene for this tremendous break-abusing experience, a city with a variety of accessible locales like the beach, a shopping mall and the calf-killing climbs of San Francisco. You're tasked as one of the 4 90s tuned taxi drivers with doing as many jobs as possible in a time frame as short as the first time intercourse of a teenage boy. Some spendthrift lazy bastards will just want to be dropped around the corner, whereas some want you to drive them from the football stadium down the highway to the heart of the towering business district, and your reward for that is a much bigger chunk of change. Plus, the faster you do these jobs, the better the tip. It's all so simple. The concept, the gameplay, the controls. It is pitch perfect, and it's the main reason why this is number one in the list, because it's an unusual choice, and I do understand that, but it is a very personal choice for me. You see, the game was an incredible bonding experience with my son, who was born in 2013. He was 3 when he first played it on my iPad, and I taught him what to do. A few months short of his 5th birthday, my clever little boy managed to finish the last level on the Crazy Box before I did. the gifted little turd. However, just as a game of football, a trip to a theme park, or burying a mutual enemy in the woods can bond father and son, so sometimes can computer games, and that is a very nice thing, and another reason why we should all love what we do in our spare time. It's not just wasting time, it can be so much more, and that is why Crazy Taxi is my personal number one. And speaking of time, I think that is that for the 1990s, which means it's time to put this series back in its cardboard box for the winter, and then open it up and finding it's dead next year, or hopefully not, so we can continue into the 2000s. Have a nice little hibernation, game of the year lists. I'll see you soon. There will still be the usual assorted build from me on this channel, so don't stray too far. Anyway, see you in 2021 for the Millenium then. That's confusing. Okay, thanks, bye.